Start webinar button. Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Helen Sosłowski. I'm the events director for Oblong Books in New York's Hudson Valley. Before I welcome our guests this evening, I have a few instructions for those of you who've not attended one of our virtual events before. If you have questions at any time during the presentation, you can type them into the chat or in the Q&A module, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them at the end of the program. We're delighted this evening to welcome Alex Amouyel, who will be talking with Chef Dan Budd about her new book, The Answer Is You, a guidebook to creating a life full of impact, which explains how being a change agent starts with doing good deeds and being a community helper, and how to set those actions in motion. Copies of The Answer Is You are available through oblongbooks.com, and I'm going to post a link for that in the chat a little later. Alex Amouyel is the founding executive director of Solve, an initiative at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, with a mission to solve world challenges. She's spent over 15 years of her career working in the social impact space, first for one of the largest children's nonprofits, Save the Children, and then for the Clinton Foundation, before leaving to spearhead Solve. Chef Dan Budd is the owner of Taste Buds Cafe in Red Hook, New York. If you're familiar with the Hudson Valley, then you'll probably know Taste Buds. He's a founding member, board member of Red Hook Responds, which was a local volunteer organization that he started as a response to COVID-19 and which now continues to grow and serve the needs of the Red Hook community. And with that, I'd like to welcome you both and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, Helen. And I've been very excited to meet you, Alex. I actually did a little poking around on the internet and caught some of your talks on YouTube. And, you know, congratulations on everything you've done. And Solve sounds really like it's been an amazing experience.
Thank you. Delighted to be here and delighted to meet you and to have Oblong Books sort of host this event.
Yeah, so well, Helen caught me because I was on a radio show talking about Red Hook Responds, and then she thought how we would match really well because of your wonderful guidebook here. And see if I can get it focused. The Answer Is You, a guidebook to creating a life full of impact. It seems like everybody needs this, huh?
I hope so. That's the idea, that not only the answer, everyone can have an impact, and that everyone needs to get involved, indeed.
Yeah, we, of course, you know, I personally wish you a lot of success with this, but it is true that, well, I'll just take it from what I have been doing in the last 2.5 years with Red Hook Responds, and I looked at your book and I saw so many things that really just like jumped out that, yes, that's exactly what happened. Like, for example, your first chapter, revealing your superpowers. Yeah, tell me a little bit about your philosophy in revealing one's superpowers.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. And I'm interested in your story too about that. But I think a lot of people, when they want to have an impact, right, be they this new generation, Gen Zers, millennials who care a lot about purpose, who care a lot about climate change, or be it people who are mid-career or nearing retirement. A lot of people suddenly come to me, and that's partly why I wrote this book, saying, I want to change the world, or I want to have an impact. Where do I start? How can I help? What problem should I be solving? Or, you know, I care a lot about this problem. And I wanted to take that moment and say, in that sense, it's a bit the wrong question to ask. Don't start with the problem, but start with yourself. And I use at the beginning this quote from Rumi, which I'm going to paraphrase, but it sort of says, like, yesterday I was young and I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise and I want to change myself. And so starting with thinking about what are your superpowers? It's thinking about your skills, your lived experience, also the negative stuff, your trauma, the things, your story of why you care and what you went through, and really thinking through that and what you can bring to. I talk about the problem solving table and wanting to make that table bigger and more inclusive and bringing everyone to that table. But indeed, in that is, what can you bring to the table? What might you be uniquely placed? And indeed, that as a chef, and you can also have an impact in many, both on food and ag, but on education, on health, on many. You can touch a lot of things, and versus, I don't know if you're good at planting trees, but let's say maybe I'm not good at planting trees, so that's probably not something I should be doing.
Yeah, and I took that, revealing your superpowers also as, there's so many people that probably don't realize that they have as much power as they do. And for example, with Red Hook Responds, we had this one volunteer who he owns a marketing company, and he works on Broadway in New York City, and he was up here and found us, and whenever we needed just that rare thing done in the middle of the day, he always popped up. So I started calling him Superman, because every time there was like a last minute thing that someone needed, he was always there to solve the problem, to jump on it, to do it. And that was his superpower. His superpower was that he could be available and he could be spontaneous. And that also, there's another thought that I had the other day when I was thinking of talking with you about this and how people get involved is, don't you think that spontaneity is powerful when it comes to volunteering? Like, for example, when maybe you're at the grocery store and someone needs the door opened, and you spontaneously hold the door for someone and let them in, and you feel good about that moment. You can do the same with like jumping into any volunteer network that's in your area, and that utilize those superpowers of just being available, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about this a little bit in sort of both chapter 4 and 5, and especially around volunteering, but not just. And I'd say this is not the spontaneous way. Chapter 4 is not a spontaneous way of thinking through things, but it is to think about all the levers of power and influence that you have in your life where you can have an impact. I think people often think about their job and their career as the first, and obviously that's where you spend the majority of your waking hours. So that is one place you can have a lot of impact. But indeed, in thinking through your volunteering, the networks you belong to, that could be a religious organization you're part of, that could be a university endowment that you can, as a student, you can try and influence. That could be that could be indeed your Saturday afternoon volunteering, or how you use your money also for power in terms of giving, in terms of impact investing, in terms of purchasing decisions. And so thinking through all the places that you have some sort of influence, or you could devote time to having an impact, is this sort of audit you can do. And indeed, I think volunteering is a great place to start, especially when you're not sure. And indeed, trying to match those volunteer opportunities to, again, your skills. And again, in the sense of this marketing person being able to be available and presumably use, hopefully, his marketing skills rather than, I don't know, his other, again, skills he may not possess, in fact, is, marketing is really expensive to do well. And that's something that if he can provide for free, that's really, that for a nonprofit or for an activist cause, that can be really, really powerful. And I do think, on the spontaneity piece, you see, we saw that a lot in good ways during the pandemic, and there renewal of the racial justice movement following the death of George Floyd, or we see this with the Ukraine. I guess, the people are riling against social media and some of the issues that it is causing at the moment. The thing that is still powerful is that, people can spring out websites and can organize online in various ways. And I start off at some point in the book, I talk about a nurse who organized in the pandemic something called Frontline Foods, which basically was, as the restaurants were closing and first responders were not getting fed or were working, that you could donate money for local restaurants to prepare meals for first responders, basically. And it was all volunteer led, and chapters popped up all around the place, and it sort of kept your favorite restaurant afloat, hopefully, and they didn't close down and fail, kept people's jobs, kept people's livelihoods, and then fed workers who were really stressed and were working, really hard on the front lines of COVID. And, that was spontaneous in that sense. And some of that is the power of technology and being able to find each other as we go.
Yeah, that was, we did similar things here in Red Hook and Rhinebeck to keep our restaurants going. And that was actually my first idea with Red Hook Responds. Was here we have all these commercial kitchens and that are possibly not going to be busy. And then we have all these elderly people that need to stay home and we need to stay distanced. So great, you make one portion of the meal in your place, I'll make another portion in mine, and we'll have some runners and we'll get this all together and we'll be able to feed people who need to stay home. And that was like the first idea, and it, some of that definitely did come true. I wanted to also get back to your book and finding your purpose at the intersection and the impact matrix. Now, I studied that a little bit, but can you tell me about that matrix a little bit more?
Yeah, and maybe I'll try and find it.
I think you said ta-da in the book. You were like, ta-da, and I was like, here it is.
Yeah, maybe I'll find the matrix so I can show it up in, give me 1 second if I can just show it up. In
while you're looking at that, yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
so it's this in the book. You can see, if people can see. But really, if chapter 1 is about revealing your superpowers, which we talked about a little bit, thinking about your skills, your lived experience, and both the positive and the negative. And chapter 2, I sort of explain both thinking about the problems that affect the most marginalized and underserved among us, and both thinking about this from a top-down perspective, but thinking about it also from a bottom-up perspective and what resonates with yourself, your community, your lived experience. The ideal place to be to have an impact is what problems affect millions and billions of those most marginalized, and where your superpowers can be most helpful in solving the problems. And in that sense, it's not that I wouldn't say it's such a transcendental insight, but at the same time, I think if you don't do that first piece about really thinking through your superpowers, you might attach yourself to a problem that you might not be the best place to solving. And that doesn't mean you can't get there, but you certainly need to then acquire the skills and really gain to be able to be most effective in that problem area. And I guess often we also see, and I guess that's where maybe in the book I sort of joke and say where Silicon Valley usually ends up is going to be using all this talent and ingenuity and computer science and lots of brilliant people to solve the problems, the marginal headaches of the most privileged among us, right? And I sort of use a bit of a caricature of a sort of a dog walking app. It's not to say that those are not things that are useful, but and clearly, a lot of people got funded and a lot of people got employed to do a dog walking app, but I'd rather see the people, the brilliant minds in San Francisco think about how we solve, how we do housing and how we do wraparound service for people experiencing homelessness in that country, and can they use those same superpowers and move across that matrix, if you will.
Yeah, and if I'm question man in my family. Like whenever we go anywhere to a museum or anything, I like have tons of questions. So feel free to barge in and ask me one if you have one for me. But and this is also pretty new to me to be doing this sort of thing. As as was introduced, I'm a chef owner of a restaurant, but in the last couple of years I've been heavy into founding, being a social entrepreneur and starting a community help network that's working every single day. I found that sometimes what keeps people energized is actually not doing what they were professionally trained for or what they've done all their life. Like someone might, they're just really inspired by cooking, but they've been a dentist all their life. And, this is actually true. We have a dentist we call one of our chefs now because he just loves cooking and it's a hobby of his, but it's, he has a whole new energy, like a whole nother lifetime of energy to put towards this. Whereas, if he was volunteering as a dentist, he might be kind of bored with that because he had done that all his life. So I guess that's another angle.
True. But there are a lot of, and I think that's great. And I don't think you should say, if you, I talk in this of like the image of a few of my friends who are sort of frustrated lawyers and they want to have more impact. And I'm like, great, we need a lot of lawyers and social impact in general. And they're like, yeah, but I actually don't want to be a lawyer. It's like, okay, so that's okay as well. Like you should, and I use the example of my friend Isis, who does work for a nonprofit that provides pro bono legal services to social entrepreneurs, which, by the way, if you need
we're lucky enough that we have an attorney who jumped right in to help us. So yeah.
Good. So and same thing with dentists. There's a lot of dental needs and across the world, and there's I forget somebody called Jean-Paul Laurent, and he calls himself the mayor of smiles. He's a dentist entrepreneur, social entrepreneur who provides dental care in Haiti and in other countries. I don't want to take people's passion away, and indeed the people's energy, and saying that can give that you can still be useful as a dentist chef volunteer. But I also think that that's where we have to recognize as well when we're volunteering that often we're getting as much out of that volunteer opportunity than we're giving. And sometimes we're giving, I also say if you're able to both volunteer with an organization and donate money, that's also good, because there is a lot of logistics and coordination, and indeed you might not we might appreciate that you're being a chef and other things, but there's a lot of things that go in the background of that still appreciate. And through this volunteering, and I don't know about your friend, you tell me, but he's probably learning quite a bit and being able to exercise some of this passion. So it gives you real experience. And I don't know if at some point he'll want to jump in full time, but that's the volunteering allows people to test the waters and learn a lot of things. And so if you're able to donate as well while you're doing that, that's the ideal, obviously.
Yeah, I will stop here and say I am watching the chat, and I kind of forgot the instructions that Helen gave us, but we'll be ready to answer any questions when that time comes from the audience. I did want to mention, and you talked about that a little bit there, is that I really appreciated the part in your book, and I can't remember where exactly it is, but about being aware that your actions can cost the business or the nonprofit, finances and resources. If you, you'd probably say it better in your book than I'm saying now, but you can be a heavy weight on them, or you can help them depending on how you jump in. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it goes back. You said it really well. It goes back to just thinking through, as a volunteer, again, what are the superpowers you can bring to the table, and and real skills and experience and passion and commitment of time, and that you should act in a way that's professional when you go. You should arrive on time, you should show up, you should read any instructions that are given to you, so that you're trying to be less, at least initially, you'll be potentially still a net drain, that you do commit over time, so that indeed your learning curve can decrease, and that you can be a net positive.
And they've spent time training you, to do something, and so you try to at least give your weight in that thing that you've been trained for.
Indeed. And then indeed thinking through aligning. I think it's not, people, as they give money, sometimes it's very strategic, and sometimes it's, somebody asked me to give, I want to go to this gala, or somebody asked me to give some money to this cause and that cause. And I think that's still really good. And as you're learning, that's great. But I do think that as you hone in to things you're interested in, that going deep and then aligning your giving with your volunteering is a good thing, notably to defray costs, still the logistics costs and the background of organizing volunteer activities and things like that.
Yeah, that's
so
wonderful.
That's some of my recommendations. But I do think it's a great place for everyone to start. If and that also, the last thing I'll say about this piece is, some people just jump in and want to create something new and be a social entrepreneur, and a lot of the people I do interview in the book are social entrepreneurs such as yourself. But I think part of really understanding the problem is really also understanding the solutions that are already out there, and either not reinventing the wheel, or studying the current solutions and then establishing why there might still be barriers that still are not solving the problem you want to be solved. And so again, volunteering for an existing organizations gives you much more knowledge and you might find that this is in fact a great solution, and one you want to invest more time in and more money, and that you want to, or that you want to dive deep in this, and you don't need to go and create a new shiny thing on the side. Or it might still say, okay, that's great, but there's still something missing, and I can be complementary. And I've also established the networks and the through the volunteering, I just have a lot more knowledge and experience in what might, even if I go and set up a shiny new solution, why that one is going to be complementary to existing things. So
I have an example with Red Hook Response for that, and then we do have a question that came in. So with the with Red Hook Response, we were basically doing a lot of errands, trying to keep people home and serve their needs. And one of the things that came up was like, okay, we're going to put together food pantry bags, and in a quick look, we already have a lot of really good food pantries, and we have those sort of resources, but we were miles and miles from a prepared meal resource, which is really needed in most communities in the country and in the world. Some people simply cannot prepare the food for one reason or another and need to get that nutrients. So we leveraged one of the food pantries to prepare the bags, which they were already doing, but then we would deliver them. So we didn't have to really, we totally used that resource. It plugged into our network and allowed us to put more into, into the meals. So the question is there a state or, whoops, I'll go back to one before that. Could you both speak of how you, from identifying a need in your community to actually organizing a response, what are the physical steps that action requires? Well, ours was easy with identifying because it was the pandemic. But people do have long-term questions about that, and Red Hook Response is actually going to do an official community needs assessment with professional help so that we can really measure the gaps and plan, and we'll be sharing this with our municipalities and other organizations. And so that's one thing we're working on. But one of the greatest ways to find out about need is to ask who needs help. Who needs help? Basically, just put it out there. Do you need help? And our helpline is open every day, and people can just call, and that's a starting survey. The actions, I'll let Alex take the second half of that with the physical steps and actions required. I'll give you the hard part.
Well, but I completely agree that also as we're in general in the social impact space, and I think sort of philanthropy is taking steps to seek to do that, is trying to move away as much as one can from a top down, I know what you need and I'm here to deliver a well or a whatever it is approach to philanthropy, and instead really thinking not only listening and doing needs assessments, but also just really thinking through co-designing and also who, why again are you well placed to solve a problem. And some of that is what I talk about in the book is proximity, and proximity can mean various things, but it can mean being part of that community and having that lived experience, or as a family having that lived experience. And so a number of people in the book that come to social impact and especially social entrepreneurship is because they or their family or their son or their daughter experienced that issue themselves, and they tried to find solutions, and when they couldn't find the solutions, I talk about Carlos, for example, whose daughter has cerebral palsy. In the end, I think they felt they had no choice but to sort of solve that problem for initially in the case of Carlos, his daughter Clara, but then in the end, seeing that throughout Brazil and then throughout the world, there was a real need for ed tech solutions for people with nonverbal disabilities. And so in that sense, it's sort of, that's how his mission and his purpose really got started. And I don't think though that means, oh, if I didn't experience, I guess in this case, cerebral palsy, that or that my family, that I can't work on it, but really thinking if this is the issue indeed that really resonates with you, why is it resonating with you, and what proximity do you have to that problem? And you can also acquire proximity through, again, spending real time with the community of affected people and really building bridges and growing your team in a way that is representative of that community. So I'd say that that's always still the first step, is both sort of understanding the needs, but also like building whatever the team is, right? It could be a group of stakeholders that is really in proximity, so that the solutions are coming from meaningfully involving the community itself.
I would say you need you need that team, you need those specialists, and you need to sort of stand on the shoulders of some other people to take some of those steps that person's asking about. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, absolutely.
The only thing frustrating about this is we're not going to get through all of the questions. I have so many and I'm going to try to go through some of our viewers' questions here. because I'm looking through mine. I'm like, oh, I definitely have to get to this. So I might jump to one of mine that's
Yeah,
more
yeah.
towards the end of the book. But for both of us, is there state or federal support available for local nonprofits, or does everything you do rely on fundraising? So in the case of Red Hook Responds, we were uniquely filling a need niche, as you say, in our community, and our municipalities recognize that. So I was able to get our village government to support us for some of our software, and our town government also. And actually, they spent a couple of years just basically supporting specific pieces of what we were doing. Obviously, the pandemic did persuade a lot of new giving. And when people see something actually working, really in action, they tend to want to give. So we raised around 150,000, I think, in donations, and started our GoFundMe. But we got that government support. And I will say, we have also one board member who is a grant writer. And there's foundations out there, community foundations, and there's a lot of grants that you can get that are specific to what you're doing. You do need help from someone who does grant writing. It's really I think it's a specific type of skill. And I've seen the grants come in, and they're, the requirements and the reporting and all that. It's a big deal, but it's out there. And one more thing is, we did get a nice grant specifically for food security work, a $50,000 grant from our assemblyman's office. And that was, again, just from seeing what we're doing and knowing that it was needed. So, have faith that there is support out there on that.
Yeah, and I think I'd add, I mean, there is more money available in general, at least in the United States, in government overall when it comes to social service provision. That is typically not an easy process for small organizations to access. And notably, I talk a little bit about that in the chapter on measurement, and how, in fact, a lot of government spending is not really measured for outcomes, which is an issue, but it's also hard to move it, right? There's vested interests, there's existing providers who are getting the funding. That doesn't mean that one shouldn't try and one isn't able to get that. And in fact, overall, it makes up a larger proportion of like the social impact budget in the US than anything else. So if one is able to figure out how to access some of that, then definitely that can be really good and fantastic. I think when people are starting out, be you as a smaller nonprofit or a for-profit, or even sort of more of something which is not yet registered as a movement, that's going to be harder, and you're going to be relying, as I guess Dan has highlighted, on small individual donations, and then hopefully some maybe bigger tickets from either formal foundations or high net worth individuals. And maybe also corporate donations, and there might be employee matching as well, which is definitely worth looking into if you have some small donors who work for some of the bigger companies. And I think that what's important there is we see philanthropists as the bigger, richer people among us, and they definitely write bigger checks and command, in that sense, more power. But actually, in the US, small individual donations make up a bigger percentage of donations than large foundations and large philanthropists. So, everyone in this country is a philanthropist, I would say, and actually the proportion people who are lower income give more money proportionately compared to their income. Compared to richer people, it goes down. Your percentage goes down as you earn more money. So I do invite everyone to always think of themselves as a philanthropist too. and indeed the power of small donations can be really powerful, both for local nonprofits to catalyze that, but also if you do manage to see yourself as a philanthropist, that you can have collective power. For example, if you join a giving circle, or indeed you join the board of a local nonprofit and you get your friends to donate as well, and to maximize your donation by getting your friends to match as well.
Yeah, one of the things that Red Hook Responds did was we did a pay what you can on our meal requests. So we found this actually, there were people who needed meals. Let's say, for example, a single parent with 5 or 6 kids, and they're trying to work and trying to do homeschool, and so getting those meals was so helpful. But they had the finances, so we could tell them, this is basically what it cost us to put this together. So if you want to do pay what you can, pay 50 cents, pay $4, whatever it is, those small donations help. And actually, I think we even had a model where if you paid this amount, you fed yourself and someone else.
You give a meal to somebody else. Yeah. And I think that also, for all of the people involved, I suspect that also really gives dignity to everybody, and gives agency to every, that yes, I might have the funds, and but I don't have the time, but I feel good about, I'm not abusing this service because I'm able to sponsor somebody else's meal, and somebody else who may not quite have the funds, at least for healthy food and various other things, is able to still give a little bit and partake and see that. I think those are great models, and it adds up. And people also,
every penny counts.
I think people hopefully also remember that in future, and some of the things that also I like is pay it forward models of, like, maybe in the future these people will be your donors because you helped them at a time where they needed the help the most, and they'll remember that and be able to pay it back and pay it forward.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of that happen. I want to jump to, there's a little bit more of a question there, but I want to jump to this one because I don't want to leave this out. And you have in chapter 7, stay optimistic and look for simple solutions. And I was immediately brought to several online meetings that I had with teams in the beginning, and I was like, yes, optimism. And I also have another word for it. I call it faith. Having faith that you can get there, you can do it, and not be negative or pessimistic or get dragged into the wrong direction. Can you talk a little bit more about chapter 7 there? I just love that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately, I think, and partly unfortunately, I think that when we see the news nowadays, and we've just emerged or partly re-emerging from this pandemic, and we see the war in Ukraine, and we see continuing increase in inequality, and we see climate change, I think we could all just go, oh my God, there's no point. And I think there's some evidence of Gen Z experiencing eco-anxiety, and that is the idea that this next generation is going to be better off than their parents is I'd say not a given in this country and overall the world. And those are really, then you don't get off and you don't get started. And I think there's still a lot of optimism that I have, that especially if everybody gets involved in that sense, and that everybody is committed to thinking about how they can have an impact and doing their part and using their talent and ingenuity in service of good. I think that that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of optimism. And when I see this new generation, while being really anxious, also really trying to redefine their success and really caring about this, that can move the needle. And optimism is, there's also a lot of evidence and studies that optimism is, you'll be happier, that having a purpose will give you, that you'll be, will improve your quality of life. And basically that's, you have to indeed have hope and even faith that if we all bandy together, we can move that needle. And somebody just told me, I wasn't actually there, but told me yesterday, told me this good anecdote. John Doerr, who is, I think, one of the Kleiner Perkins people and has made a lot of money, just donated recently $1 billion to Stanford to create a school of sustainability. And he spoke at Aspen Climate recently. And when asked why, it's because his daughter came back and really inspired by Greta Thunberg, and basically was really angry with him. And in the end, that convinced him that he needed to do something about climate change. And in this case, he did it with a really big donation. But that's pretty, obviously this is the daughter of a very powerful person, but in that sense, seeing Greta being inspired by these climate marches, that really changed the needle. So, and that's sort of, in that sense, one individual who, I don't know if it's Greta or was a daughter or him. I think it's maybe the daughter, but that really got that needle moving. So in some cases, I think there is real optimism there.
Yeah, and that's great. Thank you. I think that one of the things that I kept going back to during my journey is that having a philosophy that good is immeasurable. I got this idea one night and I was like, well, bad things are kind of like these stabbing things that are happening, war, and these things that push into us and just cause, and of course they have long-term effects, but good does too. And to me, good things seems like a slow flow, and it pushes back the bad. And so, like a small example of having faith that your hard work to get that meal to that family, that's several evenings that maybe some dysfunction didn't happen in that family, and that child was nourished enough that they could study and they felt comfortable and they slept well, and and then the long-term impact is a better life for that human being. And so you can't measure that. You can't measure what the impact is, and that having faith to be optimistic and work hard through the things that are difficult, I think, is what it's all about. I'm going to ask this question that we have, this one for Alex. Well, let me go back to the one I missed, so we have a clean record here. Starting point to asking your local agencies where their gaps are. I think a good starting point is, looking at whatever category you're in. I did a lot of work like looking at Feeding America and Nourish New York, and they have a lot of statistics on need. So you could definitely start there. And then even your smaller organizations that are, working locally might have something like Red Hook Response is going to be working on, like the community needs assessment. So I hope that helps you there. This one's for Alex. Is there a global network that new social impact entrepreneurs can easily tap into to share ideas and solutions?
Well, I'd like to say MIT Solve is a place where my day job is definitely a place where people can both share their ideas, but even submit them to receive funding and mentorship and coaching. And there's several different challenges open each year on, say, climate and health and learning. And there's a program for young people as well, 24 and under, to also take more sort of workshops and learn about problem identification and solution design and prototyping and that type of thing. So Solve is definitely one place. But there's definitely others as well. And, I think that it's definitely, and, there's things that you can apply for as well, like Echoing Green and Ashoka and things like that, which are also really great. I think one of the issues, and this is not to put a damper on things, is it sort of the space gets overwhelming in terms of where you might be able to get funding and information, and it's not the most transparent, and sometimes it's also not the most open. There are some, foundations or places that you might be able to get funding where you need to be nominated, and it's a closed application process. And indeed, there isn't like a clear common application process. Like, I guess when you apply to university in this country, sometimes you have to write 30 applications, but sometimes you're able to sort of apply in multiple batches. And we're definitely thinking about how we can improve that, I'd say, overall, in terms of transparency and being as open as possible. But again, I also think bar sort of a network like Solve or Ashoka or Echo and Green, or there's also something called Nexus for also younger people. Thinking about your local networks is also really valuable, and local community colleges or universities, local accelerators, and also indeed maybe your local government might have a program to do that, and so that also I think is really helpful.
Yeah, in New York we have, and I'm going to say this wrong because it's new to me, but I think it's the New York Community of Nonprofits, NICON or something like. So we joined them, and then there's all sort of resources for learning, whatever it may be. You want to be in development, or you want to be an executive director, and they have all these courses. And something else that I did recently was just start looking up podcasts on nonprofits and YouTubes, and all of a sudden you're immersing yourself in a network of a lot of do-gooders, and it's very convenient to listen to a nonprofit show on fundraising and take what you can out of it. So I'm gonna first of all, you had said at some point in your book, somewhere in your parents' home in Paris, j'ai travaillé à Paris, when I was a pastry chef. I trained in Paris, and
Oh, nice.
Somewhere there's a bunch of books, and that you said how they were like sitting around. And this is my compliment to you, is that when someone pulls this book out that's been on the shelf in the house for a while, it's still going to be valuable, because it is, each chapter is such a good guide, and I think it's really probably relevant in any time, where you can wake up and understand that the answer is you at any point in your life or any time in the world, and make a difference. I certainly learned that over the last year, and I think one of the things that you have to be is not afraid. I think a lot of people are afraid of overextending themselves, and that we have more time than we realize, and there's a lot of time that we use maybe doing frivolous things that we could do something for someone else. What I found is that time expanded for me, that I actually, I was like, wow, I'm getting like all this done because, I've really immersed myself in it. But, just don't worry too much. But then again, chapter 9, invest in yourself. So what do you have to say about that one? The problem solving mindset.
And I really like this idea of time expanding, both in terms of indeed when you're living closer to your purpose and you're really utilizing your skills and you have that energy, you have more time and more energy to devote to things. And also thinking through, I don't want to minimize that everybody can pick up a volunteer activity on a Saturday or or change their career, et cetera, but inviting you to think about things that you're already doing that could be redirected to social impact, be it in the communities you already are part of, or, you know, can you involve, you'd say, family time? What would be the activity you could do as part of family time that is more that can you find somewhere where you can volunteer all together, and that you're sort of deduping, you're doubling that time.
That is so helpful for volunteer networks, because you have a whole team that comes in, they all know each other, and actually during the pandemic they were a pod, so we didn't have to be
as
careful.
well, that's right. I mean, maybe you also see them all arguing, I don't know, but I think overall it's a net positive, and they'll know who has each a superpower, and it's like, okay, well, you do this thing because you're really good at this.
Mom's really good at cutting the pies, and dad's
and
good at washing the dishes.
Indeed. So I think that's great. And but I do think that this work is, you know, and is also grueling and tiring, and that when, you know, I think the risk is the work is often never done, or there are not enough resources, there's not enough time, there's not enough money, and so and the need is so great if you've picked something that's really
that's very heavy, what you said right there. That's a heavy thing.
And the system, you know, the system, which means that this problem isn't solved, is like this big behemoth, and you're trying to move the Titanic or whatever it is. And so that can get really tiring and dispiriting. And I see, I mean, I think we all seen in our networks and families a lot of burnout regardless because of the pandemic. But I think burnout is a real issue for people in social impact, especially, and that mission, you know, is also the negative side of that mission is that you're so passionate, you don't want to stop, and you may not take care of yourself. So chapter 9 is trying to have this reflection on how do you really, and I think, you know, speaking personally, I'm still learning this. I wrote chapter 9 almost for myself more than anyone else, if you will. But really trying to think about in general how you keep going, but also you take care of yourself, and how you can still be passionate about this mission and committed to your mission and your purpose without it subsuming you. And then also sort of just thinking about how you round out those skills, sort of thinking again, if you're in that quadrant on that impact matrix where you're not necessarily, you've identified a really important problem, but maybe there's still, you know, things that you need to learn yourself, how you really sort of take time to continue growing and continue learning new skills and learning about yourself so that you can be most effective in that thing. So that's sort of a self-reflective piece of the chapter, both for me personally, but also for people sort of as they go there, a bit of a warning and a hope that people do take care of themselves.
Yeah, I would be, one of the lines was, you know, you put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. And I found nature to be a really big healer for me, and something that gave me new energy, whether I'd go on a hike or just listening to a stream trickle, you know, having that downtime, and of course, nourishing yourself properly and not dropping the things that you enjoy, you know, just, you know, make sure that you do the things you enjoy, whether it's, you know, listening to music or something you do like to watch on TV, or, you know, you do need to have that time off, even though your mission is so big and you don't feel like you could maybe ever get it done. And I also think having faith and relying on other people, you know, and believing in the other people around you that they can step in and do what you're doing, and everything will be fine. That's another
that they
big
can
one.
complement your, you know, in there is chapter 6 is also about your own shortcomings and the shortcomings of the space, and recognizing you know, I do talk about while everyone has superpowers, no one is a superhero really. And in fact, somebody else, Rebecca Obuno from MIT, sort of says the superhero is the collective. But part of that is recognizing that you do have shortcomings, including just the amount of time and burning out and things like that. But they're bringing on a team of people, whatever that team is. I mean, you're employing them and everything like that. Is a diverse team allows you to complement those shortcomings and also rely on people to, and that, you know, that's where the superhero comes in, is the collective impact rather than one person, for sure.
I'm glad you brought us back to chapter 6, actually, because it's one of my questions I wanted to skip over, because it's actually, I feel like it's a really deep one, and it's one that we're kind of grappling it with right now, and that is, how do you make an impact when you need to do it working within the system that you're actually trying to dismantle? So, you know, this word of, you know, systematic problems, the word systematic is just like everywhere right now, because people are like, this system's not working. So, you know, that's a hard one. So the example for us is like, you know, giving food away doesn't really solve the problem of why they need food in the first place. I can, you know, there's definitely important pieces to why you need to give food away, but just, you know, let's speak about that one a little bit. How do you change something when you're inside it?
It's really difficult, and I think and it is that chapter 6, I think, is one where also that's why chapter 7 starts with optimism, because I've sort of like potentially destroyed your enthusiasm in chapter 6 if you read it in a linear way. But it is the recognition that you, no matter where you are, if you're trying to make change, you are either outside the system shouting and protesting, what Julie Bertolina from Harvard in her book calls agitator, and that's a really important person. But she talks about you're either the agitator, the innovator, or the orchestrator, and all of these roles are important in social change movements. But you can't. The agitator on their own might be this idealist and this purist and can point out all the problems, but nothing's going to change if they're just outside the system shouting. They need the innovator to come up with new solutions. And you also need the orchestrator type. And I would define myself, for example, as an orchestrator, which supports innovators with my job at MIT Solve. Somebody which is within the system and trying to bring new solutions while recognizing that the system advances at the pace that it advances. And I think all those roles are very difficult, right? And sometimes you wear several of those hats, but again, going back to your superpowers, some people are really good at one thing and not that great at the other. And how can they create, you know, when we think about the big social change movements or Martin Luther King or big movements, the civil rights movements, you kind of need all of those to really get things moving. And I think wherever you are, you have to be realistic and compromise your ideals on some level and accept that sometimes, the type of thing you might be doing is solving the short-term problem, but not solving the long-term problem. Or in fact, and in solving the short-term problem, you might be allowing, you know, I'm interpreting some of what you were saying, Dan, but you might be allowing people to be off the hook for solving the long-term problem. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? But there is this immediate need. And, you know, lots of other places. And I think each is understanding those dynamics as you understand the problem is important. And then making conscious choices of where your red lines are. I won't take money of these people from these people because they're going absolutely against everything that we're trying to do, versus I am going to take money from, you know, a fossil fuel company as a person who cares about climate change, because I see that by working with them, I can get them to change. And if they invest in renewable energies, they'll have an outside impact compared to if I'm Greenpeace and I'm shouting in the Greenpeace is more the activist type solution. And I think everybody has to make that choice for themselves on lots of different, and is it okay to, I don't know, fly to a climate conference? It's like the height of hypocrisy on some level, and at the same time, maybe it is a necessary evil. And everybody has to make those choices for themselves. But I think chapter 6 is trying to help you ask those questions and help you think about these and not ignore the hypocrisies and the things which stand in contradiction in this world. And that's a very difficult thing to do, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most difficult, one of the parts of the book that came out to me like being, yeah, that's really hard. I mean, I have a little story with Red Hook Responds, how we've done a little bit of both. So of course, we're, putting these meals out and we're running the food pantry bags around and we're getting people's groceries. But we also have something called the local food exchange, where I think it does actually help convert the system. For example, local produce that's grown right here in the Hudson Valley, a lot of it does travel away from here. It may actually go in a truck and go all the way to a commercial facility in Albany and then come back here, to get to a restaurant or people. So we allow our local farmers to, support locally, and we specifically food that might not be cosmetically good enough for the commercial use. Instead of going on a compost pile, it can come to us, and we can either get it to food pantries or prepare it into meals. And that's, it's working, and there's room to get better there. We also put these veggie tables into people's homes, where they're actually people who wouldn't be able to have a garden at home now have a garden, and it's nurturing them emotionally and physically, and it's just a wonderful project. And I think that's a change to the system. And then our local food exchange is kind of like a mini Amazon. So it's at shopredhook.com, and we register all of our food pantries and our shoppers, and they can basically go there and buy whatever we have every week for free. And we move a lot of bread. That's again, they're seconds, wonderful bread. And so that, I think that yeah, at least I feel good that we did a little, doing a little bit of both, and it's getting better all the time. We have to wrap up a little bit now, but this has been a great experience for me, and I'm going to be happy to, towards the end there, get this into focus for you. I was rushing through the chapters in the end for my time as well, but congratulations, and I hope that you have a wonderful tour and sell a lot of these books. It was great to meet you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan. Great to find out more about Red Hook Responds as well. It's fantastic.
Well, it was wonderful to hear from both of you. Thank you, Dan, for conducting a great conversation with author Alex Amouyel, and thank you both for a wonderful discussion that's left all of us, I think, thinking of ways that we can all make a difference. Whether it's by physically volunteering or philanthropy or however we choose to do it. I think everybody at this time in the world is seeking ways to do that. Before we wrap, I'd like to thank Krishna Bhatt and the team at Mango Publishing for helping make this event possible. A reminder to our audience that The Answer Is You, a guidebook to creating a life full of impact, is available in both our stores in Millerton and Rhinebeck and at oblongbooks.com. If you'd like to find out more about Red Hook Responds, you can visit redhookresponds.org. And I would like to thank everyone who joined us this evening, spent their Tuesday evening with us, and wish you all well. Be well. Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
luck,
you.
Alex, for the rest of
Thank
your
you,
book
Helen
tour.
and Dan. Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.